If anyone does not have a full understanding of the English language and would like to make sure that they're understanding everything that's happening, we do have translation equipment. You can go and see Manny, who's waving at you right now, and he can give you a headset. So one of the things that I've asked our panelists, and I'll remind myself because I speak very quickly, is to speak slowly so that our interpreter can translate what's happening into Spanish for the people who are in this room who need the translation in Spanish. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to go ahead and begin. First and foremost, thank you to everyone who has made themselves available to be here this evening, from our panelists, all of whom are responsible for fantastic and notable advancements in the field of public education, to the members of our community, our parents, and the children in our schools. It is because of your involvement that we are able to grow as a district. The communication between members of our community and the folks who directly are responsible for shaping public education policy is what leads to real and impactful change. Your willingness to be here tonight and to involve yourselves in this crucially important conversation about the future of young people in Lawrence will lead to an improved public school district for all. I believe that all of us here tonight share one goal: to make sure that each individual student in our public school system has access to the right education programming and the adequate plans to meet their unique needs. An opportunity that is only afforded to some and not to all is not an opportunity at all. Each of us here in this room has a common interest in education equality, and it is our goal tonight and into the future to broaden the access that we provide to our students and to ensure that each student has exceptional opportunities to learn and develop. As of late, there have been major educational policy changes, both here in Lawrence and across the state. Tonight, we hope to unpack these changes, dissect these changes, and to determine what changes still need to be made in order to ensure a brighter future for the children of Lawrence. I am confident that everyone involved in Lawrence's public school system, both within the schools here and at the statewide level, really care deeply and want nothing but the best for our children. In order to achieve these ambitions, it is imperative that we host forums such as these and unite in our desire to continually improve our public education. Again, thank you everyone for being here. I especially want to thank our panelists, Acting Commissioner Jeff Wolfson, Assistant Superintendent Dr. Toomey, co-founder and president of the National Center on Time and Learning, Harvard Graduate School of Education, Jennifer Davis, and our Lawrence Public School teacher from Inlas Academy, Samantha Curtis, for being here tonight with all of us. I'm going to give the floor in just a minute to the Chief of Staff of the Mayor of Lawrence, Dan Rivera. He could not be with us here tonight because he just had a baby girl with his wife. He just posted a picture and she's beautiful. But I will be giving the floor to Eileen Burnell so that she can share some remarks. Before that, I'd like to recognize our public officials that are in the room today. Our school committee member, senior school committee member Pat Mariano, school committee member Marianela Rivera, newly elected school committee member Donna Borolino, school committee member Stacy Seward, and school committee member and soon-to-be city councilor at large, Pavel Payano. Eileen, if you'd like to come up here to address the room.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Representative. As Representative mentioned, my name is Eileen Burnell. I am Mayor Rivera's Chief of Staff. And as she mentioned, he is not here with us tonight because he is with his wife and their new baby, which is very exciting. I'm from the mayor's staff. Also in the back room is Wendy Luzon. If you're not a native English speaker and you want to speak with someone from our office who understands Spanish better, Wendy's with me this evening to just make sure that that's accessible. But we're really here tonight to listen to what the panel has to say and what you folks have to say, so that we can bring that feedback back to them. And I know the mayor is also going to be watching the video so that he can get a sense of what happens here tonight. I know he wanted to congratulate and thank the officials that are here tonight, and I know the representative went through the school committee members, so I won't repeat them, but also Maria de la Cruz, who is from Senator Italian staff, but also a newly elected city councilor too, District A, is with us tonight, so it's great to see her. Also, we always love it when Secretary Wolfson can come to ours, and we are grateful for him. The mayor did want us to come and listen, and I'm not here to speak for him, and if you have questions, I will bring the questions to him. I can't really answer them. But one thing he did want to say is that he feels that the most important thing that the school system needs to do in the immediate future is the hiring of our next superintendent of schools. And the thing he feels, as both a member of the receivership board and a member of the school committee, is his goal is to make that process as transparent as possible, that he's committed to that, and he wanted to make sure that you folks know that. So that's the one message that he wanted to send you tonight, and he did send his regrets. He does have a very important commitment tonight, though, and thank you all for your time, and I'm grateful to be here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, newly elected City Councilor for the District A, Maria de la Cruz, for being here. I now am going to open the floor, and just to give everyone kind of an idea of what we're expecting, I'm going to give the floor to our panelists to introduce themselves. Then we're going to allow Assistant Superintendent Dr. Toomey to give a brief presentation on the state of the Lawrence Public Schools. Once she completes doing that, I am going to pose 3 questions that have subsets of questions to them on Chapter 70 funding. And then we'll do an innovation, and then we'll do another question on English language learners and what's happening in the district when it comes to those things, or statewide. After the 3 questions are posed, I'm going to give the floor to Commissioner Wolfson, who will give a presentation on the state of receivership in the Lawrence Public Schools. Once that ends, then we will open this up to a town hall meeting and allow all of you to pose the questions that you may have. And I'll set some ground rules when we get to that point. I want to make everyone aware of the fact that there are many of you here who have many questions. So if you're asking a question, please make it brief. If that question's already been asked, please don't ask it. You're going to come up to the podium. And if there's anything in particular to a child's case, if you could not mention a person's name, we want to make sure that we're respecting confidentiality. And if there's something that you specifically need assistance with, you can come up to myself or Manny or someone from the mayor's office, and we could be of assistance to referring you to the correct channels. So without further ado, I will give the floor to the panelists to introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Samantha Curtis. I am a teacher at Enlace, which is a newcomers academy in Lawrence. It's in its 3rd year, so it's a rather new school, but very grateful to be here to speak on behalf of my experience working the last 2 years in Lawrence at my school as a high school ESL math teacher. Before that, I taught in Revere for a few years. I grew up in Boston, so Lawrence is a new community to me, but it's been really fun the last 2 years getting to know the community and just learning from everyone, so thank you for having me.
Hi everyone, it's great to be back in Lawrence. I'm the co-founder of the National Center on Time and Learning, and now working also at the Education Redesign Lab at Harvard University. I was so proud to be a part of an effort 5 years ago or so to support Lawrence as it looked to redesign its schools, to expand learning time, and to bring new enrichment opportunities for students. So it's terrific to be here with you tonight.
Good evening, buenas tardes. My name is Jeff Wolfson. I'm the Acting Commissioner of Elementary and Secondary Education in the Commonwealth. I've been working for the Commonwealth for about 35 years, the last 22 years with the Department of Education. Most recently, I've been the Deputy Commissioner for a number of years, and as I think many of you know, our Commissioner Mitchell Chester passed away unexpectedly last June. And I was asked to step in as acting commissioner after his death. And right now our State Board of Education is in the middle of a search. Applications are actually due this Friday for the next Commissioner of Education for the Commonwealth. And it's my privilege to serve the department while we wait for the appointment of a new commissioner. So happy to be here tonight.
You guys can take it off if you'd like, that makes it easier.
All right, I have a nice loud voice. I think everyone will hear me. Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mary Toomey. I'm very proud to be here representing our superintendent, Jeffrey Riley, who sends his regrets and is unable to be with us this evening due to a family commitment. So I will do my best to represent him. I am in my 40th year of service to the Lawrence Public Schools, and feels like yesterday, I have to say. And it's been a pleasure and a privilege. I went to the Leonard School for kindergarten through 2nd grade. My mom and dad went to the Leonard School. My dad didn't speak English when he started at Leonard. And for a big chunk of the time that I've been in Lawrence, I was privileged to serve as principal for about 19 years, most of that time at South Lawrence East School and then South Lawrence East Elementary. And I'm very proud of the work that we did at that school, getting to level 1 and commendation status for 2 years, 2010 and 2011. And the work continues. I've been in this role now for, this is my 5th year, and it's my pleasure and privilege to coach principals, to support curriculum and development and design, and to offer professional development to our teachers. So thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Dr. Toomey, 40 years.
This is number 40.
So my name is Pavel Payano. I don't know if this is on. Hello. Hello? All right, well, I'm sure you guys can hear me. I have hopefully a deep, loud voice. My name is Pavel Payano. I'm a school committee member representing District C, which is the Arlington and half of Tower Hill. I've been on the Lawrence School Committee for the last 7 years. Jumped onto the school committee during a really turbulent time. I had a lot of, my parents were teachers here. My dad was a teacher for about 25 years. And I had a lot of teachers that were friends of mine who essentially at that time, I thought things could improve and things could get better. And there was a sense of hopelessness across the city when it came to improving our education system. Since then, I've seen there's been a lot of improvements. I think there's a lot more that we can do. And essentially, I'm here as a not just a member of the Lawrence community, someone that's gone through Lawrence Public School System, but someone who wants to advocate for students and parents to ensure that our youth get the best education possible. I want to thank Representative Matias and all the folks on the panel, especially the Commissioner, for being here today, because I think forums like this are extremely important so that way the community understands how the district is moving forward.
Thank you, and we're having a technical difficulty with the mics, but until the library figures it out, we'll do as best as we can. We're going to shut off and dim the lights because we're going to give the floor to Assistant Superintendent Dr. Toomey, who will give a presentation of the current state of the Lawrence Public Schools.
Thank you very much again, everybody. I'll try to be brief in this presentation. The superintendent did want me to share a little bit about the work that's been going on here. It's really important to us that we focus on those things most important to all of you, to all of us, and academic achievement being, sort of the #1 priority of where we're going. And we're certainly not where we want to be, but seeing this upward trajectory in reading, in ELA, in math, and in science for all the years since 2011 is very encouraging. We know that there's more work to do, but we strive to make sure that we're promoting a college-going culture for those students and families that are interested in that, and we know how very important that is. I am the first person in my family to attain a college education. I have 2 advanced degrees beyond my master's degree, and I know what that meant to my mom and dad, God rest. And it's just really important that we pass that along to our students. So achievement is very, very important, and we're working to make that even better year over year. The other thing that the superintendent has been really focused on and has done a great job is improving the graduation rate by nearly 20 points since he came in 2011, and also looking at the dropout rate decreasing by half in the time that he's been there. And that has been from some very well-defined and very meaningful re-engagement efforts and doing things that make it very helpful for our students to receive credit recovery options and other things of that nature. And so those statistics are very remarkable, and we're very proud of that. You know, the facility improvements, we could list them, and it would take a long time, but he was very focused coming in on making sure that our kids and our teachers were learning in buildings where they had adequate, not only materials, but adequate facilities. And this is just a recent picture of the HVAC system that was recently installed over at the North Common Educational Complex, and much needed, and it was a great job by all getting that to happen, and having state support for that project. The arts and enrichment is very significant and very important to Mr. Riley. He came in talking always about the achievement gap and what we needed to do about that, but equally important, he felt that we had to make sure that there was not an opportunity gap for our kids, that our kids had every opportunity to engage in arts and enrichment at every school. And I hope that you've been able to attend many of the performances and the great theater that goes on here, the musical performances, the great art shows. There was a recent charity auction where our students can really showcase their talent, and it does a lot and says a lot about where they're going. A lot to remember about what's happened as a result of this great investment in arts and enrichment, and our skills that our students are gaining that are not easily measured on anybody's assessment, but they're skills like leadership and perseverance and self-confidence and courage, and they're just, they do such a great job to be able to get up in front of an audience. I can tell you that even after 40 years, standing here in front of you is not an easy thing to do, right? But our kids go and they do those things, and they can stand up there and be very proud and perform, and that's going to take them into their high school years and college years and beyond. So we're very proud of all that. We talked a little bit about the commitment that Lawrence has made to expanded learning time, and it's important for everyone to realize that when Superintendent Riley came in, it was one of the initiatives that he was very passionate about, and I think that's where I made an initial connection with him. My dissertation was about expanded learning time and working with students for a longer period of time and what that would mean to supporting their achievement. And so what we've done in most K-8 schools is that we've increased the school year by anywhere from 205 to 400 hours, depending on the school, and it's really the equivalent of adding 50 days of learning on the average. So you can imagine what an extra 50 days of learning does for a student. The time is just so critically important. And the other thing that it's done is that it's allowed us to really take advantage of our community partnerships that we have and to bring them in. And really, these are places with beautiful facilities, swimming pools, indoor swimming facilities, gymnasiums, music studios at the YMCA, and really take advantage of all of those things that, were going. These buildings were empty during the school day before, and they were waiting for our kids to get out of school and to run programs into the afternoon and evening. And as a result, more and more of our students are taking advantage, not only because of their once-a-week commitment to enrichment that happens during the school week, but also they've become members of some of these programs. And I also want to point out and say that many of these community members have come a long way with us in terms of providing that partnership by going out and seeking subsidies from places like New Balance and Raytheon and other places who have been able to provide some funding so that all of it doesn't fall back on the partner or Lawrence Public Schools to make that happen. Metropolitan Opera in New York City, the Urban Voices program that we have going right now in 4 of our schools is subsidized at a rate of 80% because of a philanthropist in Boston who's making that happen just for Lawrence Public Schools. And those of you who might have children who are in the Urban Voices program, you know it's spectacular. So I just want to say a shout out to all of our community partners and thank them for everything that they're doing for us every day. So this is also very encouraging. We've doubled the number of active employees that we have who are actually residents of Lawrence. This was very important to Superintendent Riley, and so all of our principals, I know, they do all that they can to seek candidates from the city so that we can increase folks to the workforce here, and we can be a great employer as well. I also want to mention that We've more than doubled the number of Latino teachers in the district as well in the same time period. Part of my role is really to take a look at how we're working with curriculum, a standards-aligned curriculum and instruction program, and noting that in an autonomous school vision that the superintendent has, each school is responsible for the review and selection and implementation of their own curriculum. However, I see my role as one where I try to really ensure that the curriculum that we're recommending to schools, that we're seeking to network schools around, is high quality, is definitely very aligned, and provide some resources that we can use and send home for parents so that there's connections as well. I want to just call out one of them, Core Knowledge Language Arts, the Core Knowledge Foundation. Just this year, we partnered with them to bring Core Knowledge Language Arts to 165 K-2 classrooms in 14 schools. And so now we have this very comprehensive foundational reading program that really provides kids with those foundational skills that they need to become fluent and automatic readers, with the goal of having grade level performance by the beginning of 3rd grade for every student. That's our goal. The teachers are enjoying it, the kids love it. Parents, I hope that, if your child is part of this, you've seen some of the skills readers that are coming home where kids are being very successful and enjoying the reading very, very much. So we're very happy about that. Gigi's up there. Some of our families might recognize the penguin. ST Math is a wonderful supplemental math resource, blended learning. It happens online, either on a tablet or on a laptop or a desktop, and it has a home component. The wonderful thing about ST Math is that it's all conceptual understanding and puzzles. There is no language involved. So students are not reading, parents are not reading. We're just trying to figure out very high-level, sophisticated math. And our kids, all kids, are doing great with the penguin. And I know because I give hundreds of trophies out every single year to kids that finish the program early. So we're very happy about that. The other part of my role is to really look at high-quality professional development so that we are ensuring that our teachers have the best opportunity while our kids are at enrichment, that we're providing some really high-quality professional learning in the form of some national organizations, including Jennifer mentioned the National Center on Time and Learning, where I was very involved when we were starting that roll out with expanded learning time, and we've evolved and are now working with some really fantastic providers and really enjoying that. So we try to set the tone around the fact that there's nothing better. The curriculum is great, the partnerships are great, ELT is wonderful. There's nothing that replaces a great teacher in the classroom. So we want to be sure that our teachers have the best opportunity to continue to collaborate, to network, and to grow. So that's why I love that picture on the left. I led a PD today with one of our partners for science. We were over at the Partham Educational Complex where we did learning walks in elementary classrooms and in middle school classrooms today. And it was just wonderful to do that with a group of educators from across the district. It was really exciting. So thank you to our partners who help us to deliver great professional development. And thanks all so much to all of you and to Representative Matias for having us here this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Toomey. We're going to have our panelists go back to the table. We're going to bring up the light, and then we're going to move to the other phase of this forum. Can you check to see if that mic is working? Because this one's working. I just want to make sure we're ready to go with the mics. It is not working. Okay. This one started working, so we'll give them that one. Perfect, and we'll give... Yeah. But we need one for the side. So yes, give it to Samantha. So this portion of the forum entails asking 3 questions, and our panelists will add their expertise and opinions to the questions that I will pose. The first question is in regards to innovative redesign model. And this question is really posed to Jennifer, but any of our other panelists who want to add anything to this question are welcome to do so. Can some of the redesign models that have been adopted across the Commonwealth by public schools in districts such as Salem, Springfield, and Chelsea also be applied at the Lawrence Public School System, especially when we're looking at the grades 9 through 12s?
Well, absolutely, and I think the good news is Lawrence is already on a very good trajectory to implementing some very innovative approaches. Samantha is at one of the innovative high schools. There's been a major redesign effort at the high school, at several of the high schools in the city. I think the redesign work that Mary talked about with regard to integrating community partners, making sure young people are getting individual attention from teachers during the course of the day, those are all innovations. Some of my most recent work, which I think is something that a city like Lawrence could really benefit from too, is to look at how we can ensure a developmental support from birth all the way through high school and into higher education or career training, and what are the kinds of supports and opportunities, not only during the school day, but also in the summer months, after school, around health and mental health services that we can help communities bring together to support kids. So that's one of the most innovative new areas of work that we're doing. We're seeing this unfold all over the country. And I think it's an exciting opportunity because of all the progress that Lawrence has already made to think about going to that next step and integrating these other broader services on behalf of kids.
Excellent. Anyone else would like to add anything to the topic? So a lot of these questions that we're posing, we could actually have one entire forum on that particular question. The next question I pose is to our commissioner, and it's in regards to Chapter 70 funding. What is the history and current structure of Chapter 70 funding? Are there any opportunities for reform? And if you could explain what Chapter 70 funding is, I assume that some people may not know what that means.
I'm happy to do that. Chapter 70 is the major program of state aid to K-12 school districts around the Commonwealth. It's a program that's been around for about 22 years. It came in as part of our Education Reform Act of 1993. Today it's about $4.5 billion going out to local school districts. It's a progressive formula, which means wealthier communities get less money, poor communities get more money, and that's the way it should be. For Lawrence, roughly 95% of your school budget is coming from Chapter 70 and other state aid programs. So the good news is that the state is contributing an awful lot to these schools, so we have a lot of interest in how well they're doing. But the other side of that is that although we don't require the city to just contribute a large amount of money, we hope you will contribute as much as you can. Most of the communities in the Commonwealth pay out of their own local dollars more money than they're required to by the Chapter 70 formula, because the community wants to do as much as they can for the schools. And I know the city has got a lot of fiscal challenges, but we would certainly urge you as we move forward following the election, and I know the mayor is very interested in this, to try to provide as much local support as you can. As I mentioned, Chapter 70 has been around for some 20-odd years. A lot has happened in education that time. We've learned a lot more about what it takes to run a successful school system. So every once in a while, we do want to step back and take a look and make sure that Chapter 70 is providing districts with all of the resources they need. And we had one of those looks a couple of years ago. We had a legislative commission called the Foundation Budget Review Commission that spent many months listening to testimony from educators, from parents, from community members. And their conclusion was that even though Chapter 70 is one of the most generous programs in the country, it still isn't where we want to be in Massachusetts. Education is very important to us here in Massachusetts. It's the heartbeat of our economy. We need our kids to be well educated so that they can go on to college, go on to careers. That's what's going to keep our economy strong. The commission reported back that costs in some areas of school budgets, particularly health insurance, special education costs, were increasing faster than we were able to keep up with them. We've also identified a number of areas where we have needs today that we weren't even thinking of back in the early 90s when Chapter 70 was first designed. Technology in the classrooms, computers. We want our kids to learn how to use computers. Full-day kindergarten, preschool programs. We recognize the importance of that today. The extended day programs you've heard a little bit about today. They all cost more money. So I think there's a recognition by the governor, by the legislature, that we do need to increase our funding to schools. We started to do that last year in this year's budget, and I hope we'll be able to continue to increase the funding we provide to schools in the years ahead.
So next November, there's going to be a very important ballot initiative. It's called the Millionaire's Tax, and it would actually bring new resources to bear to education and transportation infrastructure across the state of Massachusetts. That initiative is probably the only way that we will be able to raise the resources we need for public education in Massachusetts. So I'm urging you already to plan to get out and vote yes on that particular ballot initiative for more resources for education.
That's a great point. I have a question for our school committee member, Pavel Payano. How can individual public school districts contribute equally in their own right to the funding of our local public schools?
I would say by doing it, right? So one of the things that I've been talking to a lot of folks in the city for the last several months is just how our schools get their money. As the commissioner said, they get it through Chapter 70. One of the things that's been happening in Lawrence, not in the past couple of years, but in the last 2 decades, is that our city hasn't contributed the way that they should be. So as the commissioner said, we get 95% of our budget from the state, but this money ends up almost being 100% of the budget of the Lawrence Public Schools. Early this year, I did some research, and it looks like there were some years where the city, put zero money into our schools. Over the last 7 years, we've owed, the public school system more than $25 million. That's $25 million that didn't go to books, that didn't go to teachers, that didn't go to the education of our kids. So I think that moving forward, we have to ensure, us as residents, we have to make sure that the city is contributing at least the minimum. And the minimum that the state asks is that 5% for an adequate education. And to me, if someone said, hey, you're going to see an adequate doctor, an adequate mechanic, an adequate anything, I'm going to go somewhere else. So I think when it comes to education of our children, it shouldn't be an adequate anything. The city should be putting in a little bit more. Even though we are a city that is, we don't have the same resources as other towns, at the end of the day, our youth are our future. Our youth are the future leaders of our community. We got to make sure that we are investing in them. One other thing that a lot of people don't take into account is outside of Chapter 70, cities also supposed to provide for the infrastructure of our school buildings, ensure that there's roofs, there's boilers, that there's windows, that the buildings are painted. So we need to make sure that we're constantly doing that, and also, sometimes more importantly, that we're thinking strategic about the buildings that we currently have, and that that we're not reactive. So for example, if we have a school building where the population's increasing, then we've already thought that out. We've seen the population grow, and that we are planning on creating new buildings before a problem arises. So I think at the end of the day, though, what makes a difference between a city that puts in, the right amount, whatever the right amount might be, it's really dependent on the community that they live in and how active those parents and those community members are in ensuring that they tell their leaders that this is our priority. I believe that education is a priority, and it's up to the folks in this room and the other voters and people living in the city to make that happen.
Thank you. I would like to recognize that we were joined by one of our newly elected school committee members, Alyssa Salas. Thank you for being here. Another question in regards to the foundation budget, and anyone on the panel is welcome to add your viewpoint to this. To what degree should the Foundation Budget Review Commission increase their expectation of the % of students in need of special education? And do we think that there has been an increase in the need of students in our districts who have special education needs, and that somehow we're not prepared as a school district to provide those resources?
I'll talk a little bit from the state perspective, and perhaps Dr. Toomey would like to talk about what the district is doing. There's no question that special education is expensive, and one of the things we've noted is that Massachusetts historically has identified a very high percentage of students as needing special education, much more so than many other states. So that's one of the areas we're asking school districts to take a closer look. All students have differing needs, whether it be through learning disabilities or issues at home or language challenges. Doesn't necessarily mean that every child who has some needs to be classified as a student with disability with all of the extra work that goes into that. I think there's lots of techniques these days to focus on what each student needs and do that in the classroom rather than, some kids certainly need a lot of extra supports because of their disabilities, but for many students, that extra help should be available right in the classroom. And we talk about English learners. The number of students who are English learners in the Commonwealth has literally doubled in the last 10 years. So it should no longer be that we need special programs for English learners. That should just be part of the general education program in our schools.
Thank you very much. To speak to the special education issue, I personally am very proud of what Massachusetts has done and has been sort of a front runner in this field for a very long time. Chapter 766 even preceded the federal law, and so Massachusetts has had at the forefront the rights of children and their families in order to be served. I am still a special educator, and that's the role that I played here in Lawrence before becoming an administrator. We have gone through, many years of looking at how to do this better and better so that all children can be served and their needs can be met. And Lawrence has created a strategic plan in the last few years, and we had parents involved in that planning so that we could look at the question of inclusion and to make sure that our learners were being provided with the right services and supports in the least restrictive environment so that they can be with peers. And we have some very successful programs happening now in several of our schools. It's very exciting to see some kids on the spectrum who have been moved out of a placement that was more restrictive and are now being included and in the regular schoolhouse. And that's just very exciting to see. But as the commissioner said, all of special education is expensive. Inclusion is expensive. We can't do it without support. So we have to everyone has to work together and make sure that we're meeting the needs of every learner. I think the other thing Lawrence should be proud about is that our percentage of special needs students in our district sort of mirrors. We're not far above the state average, and there are many communities who, can't say the same. So I think that we're doing a good job. We keep a lot of our kids also in district. We're very fortunate to have a therapeutic school, and so we're not, while we do have some out-of-district placements that happen from time to time, it's not our first level of resort. We're always looking for that least restrictive environment so that kids can be educated. And the parents are the ones that are the real advocates for their children and for their services, and Massachusetts has given them those rights, and I think we should all be very proud of that.
The one thing I'd like to add is I think that we definitely need to make sure that more money is coming into special education. I think one of the big issues that we're getting across this district, and I'm sure from what I've been told, it's going on, you know, in other towns across the Commonwealth, is your speech therapist. You know, it's really hard to hire speech therapists. It's really hard to keep them in the district. There are, you know, tons of other places that are giving them, you know, more money, you know, more benefits than what Lawrence can offer. And I think if we had more resources, we'd be able to try to compete. And when you have families that are waiting for students to see somebody, it's really sad. And it's beyond the district's control because, you know, what we need is the resources to be able to provide that.
Great. And then I know we've made some great strides in the legislature with passing the Look Bill, although, you know, it's taking far too long, in my personal opinion, to have this piece of legislation be actually implemented. Should support for ELL programs be calculated as a base rate per student or as an added incremental rate?
Could you explain what the Look Bill is for those that don't know?
So it's the language, so the history in Massachusetts is that you would go to your public schools and you would be taught in English, and that our local school districts would have no authority or flexibility in molding what they could do in their curriculum for English language learners. What the Look Bill does is say, that's not the best way to teach these English language learners. What we should be doing is teaching them in their own native language as well in English, and doing like a dual immersion. And one of the things that I have done through my research, and which I support, is that I feel like this is a great step forward, and I'm happy that we're doing it. It's taken far too long. But are we providing the resources, the economic resources, to make sure that we're giving our English language learner students the tools that they need to succeed? If you look historically at the rates of English language learners, they've been underperforming, not because they're not just as good students, it's because they still haven't acquired the English language. So when you're being tested in English on subject matter and you cannot understand the test, you're not going to perform as well as someone who does understand the English language. So do you think that the Look Bill, we're moving in the right direction, but do you think it needs economic support behind?
The Chapter 70 formula provides a significant amount of extra money for districts for each English language learner. I think the biggest challenge, and we're just, of course, just looking at the Look Bill now, but what we know even from the years of structured English immersion is our biggest challenge is getting teachers in the classroom who know how to instruct English learners. We're working very closely with our state colleges and universities to make sure that when they are teaching our teachers of tomorrow, that this is very much a part of the curriculum. It's how to deal with students who are English learners at different levels of English language development. Sometimes you know their language, sometimes you don't know their language. Sometimes they're the majority in your classroom, sometimes they're by themselves. Each of those situations requires techniques that our teachers need to know.
If I could just add on for a moment, as the commissioner said, this is a very important topic to us in Lawrence. More than 30% of our students are classified as English language learners, and beyond that, more than 70% of our families or our children have a language other than English as their home language. So even if they're not classified as an English language learner, they may be going home and speaking and hearing another language. So we need to have supports for students even beyond those that are for English language learners, only the 30%. And while that's an average, we have some schools that are up beyond 40% of their students. So it is important that we're doing those kinds of things. We're very proud that all of our teachers have fulfilled the SEI endorsement for their license so that they can understand and be able to serve those skills. We have a small cohort of first-year teachers that we're working with now to be sure that they have some options. We're going to run the SEI course in district, so it's free of charge. We're going to give 3 different options for those first-year teachers so that they won't have to pay for the course on their own, and we can make sure that they have access to those skills that they need in order to do those things. But you're absolutely right, Representative, at every single classroom. So when we talk about what's going to happen with the Look Bill, and we're very excited about looking at alternative programming, we know that the department is going to have a webinar in December, and our director of English learners is very interested in that webinar to learn more. We have to look at the needs of all of our classrooms and all of our teachers and beyond, because it's very significant for us.
Thank you. So one last question, and then we're moving to the town hall, and we're doing our open forum. And this question is really for Samantha and anyone else who'd like to add their remarks to it as well. What are some of the more exciting, innovative, and progressive ELL programs that LPS has taken and implemented, and what early successes have been observed?
Great. So as I mentioned before, I work at Enlace, which is a newcomers academy at the high school. So it's a new school that primarily serves students who are arriving to the country from grades 9 through 10, and students who are older go to International High School, which some of you might be familiar with. So I work with the younger high school age students, and I specifically work with a cohort of students who have been identified as SLIFE, which means they've had interrupted learning in their background. So that means a lot of them are coming at the age of 15 and maybe have missed some significant parts of school in their life, or where they're at, like with their math is much different than where the 9th grade curriculum is here. So it's really innovative in the sense that I have a smaller classroom of students. I have about 12 students, and I can work with them on the foundational skills that they need to be ready for 10th grade. And I think that's an amazing opportunity for these students, because when they're given those supports, they're able to do it. But when they're thrown into a larger classroom, lacking those supports, lacking that sheltered English immersion that they need, lacking the foundational skills, it's going to be really hard for them to take the 10th grade MCAS, right? But when they're given that opportunity in a smaller classroom designed to meet their needs, we're seeing them really reach that success. So our school, within the first year, about 70% of our students reached level 3 language, which means that they're ready to go to 10th grade. And that's an incredible success, that within 1 year, those students can go to the 10th grade. And so within the 3 years that our school has been in operation, we're seeing like, okay, if we give these students the support they need in this small environment, they're able to reach that. So I think that's just one example of an innovative model of a school that has been really working, and I'm excited to see like where it continues to go from here.
Great, thank you. So we're now going to open up the floor for the open forum section, where if you have any questions relating to public education, you can come and ask. Just a couple ground rules. We do have to be out of the library by 8 p.m., so we have about an hour, almost an hour, about 50-something minutes. And I know everybody, as they walked in, gave their name if they were interested in asking a question. So I'm going to go by that list. So if people can be respectful of the time that there are a lot of people who want to ask questions. Yes. No, he did that already.
Oh,
yeah.
sorry. Receiver.
Can we talk about receivership?
No. Yeah, I think he had 10 minutes
We
for
have
the receivership.
Okay, so we haven't. I thought we did.
I don't need 10 minutes.
So yeah, so before we start the forum, I thought we had already covered the state of receivership. I'm going to give the floor to the commissioner, and then from there on, we'll start the open forum.
Just a quick update, and I think many of you are already familiar with what's going on. Superintendent Riley has announced that he's going to be stepping down from his position at the end of this school year, and I must tell you that we're so proud at the state level, not only the job he's done, but the job that everybody has done here in Lawrence. The district, as you heard comments from Dr. Toomey, has come a long way in the last 6 or 7 years. The schools are not yet where we want them to be, but we're really incredibly heartened and very optimistic that these are going to be the schools that we're going to all be very proud of in the future. And that's been a team effort from not just the superintendent, but his staff, the entire faculty. I know Frank McLaughlin, Lawrence Teachers Union, has been a big partner in this. Parents, the students themselves, the community for its support. It takes a village to run a school system, and that's been very much the case here. So want to make sure everybody knows that at the state level, we're very, very pleased with the progress the district has made. So now we are starting to think about what the next phases are going to look like. We don't want to just pull out one day and say goodbye, you're on your own. The transition back to local control needs to be thoughtful, and it will take some time, but it also always needs to be done with the best interests of the kids in mind. So what we're putting together is, rather than have an individual who will serve as receiver during these next few years, we're going to have a board, a 7-person board that will serve as the receiver. It will be comprised of both community members as well as state representatives. We're in the middle right now of talking with folks about potential membership on the board. The mayor, of course, has already indicated his interest and willingness to serve. We're looking for a range of backgrounds and perspectives, but most importantly, we're looking for individuals who are committed to continuing the work we're doing here and committed to seeing Lawrence Public Schools become an outstanding urban school system. For the next few months, once we appoint the board, they'll start meeting in January. They will be open meetings. The community will be invited to them. Their first order of business will be to hire a new superintendent. I appreciated the comments before from Mayor Rivera, who is chief of staff, that he's committed, as are we, to a very open and transparent process in hiring a new superintendent. We want to find someone who will be a strong educational leader and somebody who can help, again, take the district from where we are today all the way back to local control. So that will be the board's initial responsibility for the rest of the school year. Then in July, when Jeff steps down, the board and the new superintendent will step in and we'll be ready for the next chapter of success.
Great, thank you so very much, Commissioner. So, like I was mentioning, I have a list of people who signed up to ask questions. I will call your name, and if you're still interested in asking that question, you can come up here to the podium. I will give you the microphone, and the corresponding panelist who can answer your question will answer the question. So, Celia Negron. No? Okay, we'll move on to the next person. Our school committee member, Pat Mariano.
I was going to ask the foundation question, and you answered it in Jeff.
Excellent. John Stigera. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. John Stigera or Stigasi? No? Okay. Jacqueline Marte. Please.
Thank you. I have a question. If we have so many Hispanic teachers, why we don't have anybody today here at the panel? If we have so many Hispanic teachers, why we don't have anybody?
So I can be responsible for that, and I take full responsibility for that. So this is a panel that I've been planning honestly since June, and it just so happens that we were able to actually formalize it today in terms of people scheduling and things that have been happening at our office. So what this panel was initially going to be was a policy panel to talk about innovation, extended learning time, English language learners, and it was really about policy. As things changed in the last couple of weeks, we molded this panel to speak to some of the concerns that were happening into this district. So, you know, we heard that there was going to be a transition with a receivership, and so we decided to mold the panel because we thought a lot of people were going to have questions about this. So these people that we have on the panel, like Samantha, was coming here to talk about English language learners because months ago she had met with us and she had been working with us, Jennifer Davis as well. If it would have had a different objective, we would have made sure that we would have included Latino teachers. I didn't do it intentionally, and I'm fully responsible if it's not representative of our school district, because I made the decisions to invite certain people, and certain people committed and others didn't. So the next question is Janitza Rizzo, who I know is part of CPAC. Teresa, do you want to ask a question?
Good evening. My question is, there's a lot of concerns within our parents in CPAC, which is the special education, and is as to the special or the extracurricular activities for kids with special needs, which we actually lack off. We don't have the activities for our kids to engage in, just like the regular students. Thank you. And what is that? Where do we stand, and where are we going forward regarding that?
Thank you so much for your question. I know I've gone to CPAC, and Commissioner, me and you have talked about this. Last time we met, I had mentioned that some of our CPAC parents were concerned with the extracurricular activity. So I don't know if anyone would like to add.
I'll jump in, and then certainly the Commissioner can as well. As I shared with you earlier, the fact that most of our K-8 schools are now in something that we call expanded learning time, the length of our school day has increased considerably. That's for every student in the school. So if your child is attending an 8-hour school that's in session for 8 hours a day, then all of that enrichment and all of that programming is happening. Now beyond that, many of our schools are offering some out-of-school time or extracurricular activity that goes beyond the 3:30 or 4 o'clock time frame. And those are mostly clubs where students elect to be involved in. There's some athletics, intramurals that go on that kids do tryouts for, and that happens as well. And we recognize that sometimes the piece that's the issue for possibly some of our kids that are identified is that it's a transportation issue, because their day transportation doesn't cover them in the extracurricular after school. I think that's something that we can work on and look at, and something for the CPAC to take up at their next meeting and really talk about that. But we're putting together a list of all of those schools and what they're exactly offering. The principals are very interested in making sure that they are addressing the needs of the parents and opening up those programs to all learners. They've also expressed a willingness to be sure that they have special education licensed instructors available for those programs when at all possible. So I think this is an example of us working together, families and schools together, so that we can improve the practice.
No, that's great, and I know that our office has been in contact with Jeff Riley's office to talk about getting an assessment of what schools are providing what type of program, so we can get an idea of where we have programs, where we don't, and how can we address this need. And I don't know, Commissioner, if you want to add anything. So then next on my list I have Nancy Sala. Question? Pass. Pass. Eric? No last name?
So seeing that the ELL learning programs that Ms. Curtis mentioned is in such dire need, and in the short time that you've been in and around, you've had great leaps and bounds. Representative Matias, you had mentioned that you guys were working on legislation that gives the school district the opportunity to make these changes. So I'm going to ask you as a representative, because oftentimes legislation happens. The planning and how to implement that legislation often doesn't follow. So I'm going to ask the question back to you. How much money, if any, in this lookout legislation How much of the additional money to help these type of programs has been put into that legislation?
Zero. So the look bill, what it essentially did was give local school districts the authority to start implementing English language immersion with Spanish and English. So it gave the authority to do so, it gave the flexibility. It did not in any way, shape, or form actually give resources or any money. So one of my concerns with the bill was this is a great move forward. We're actually allowing local school districts who know their students best and know the need to decide what way they should be teaching English language learners, but there are no way giving the resources that would maybe be needed to train teachers to get that education and certification that they need. So I think it's something that's lacking, and in my office, one of my hopes and one of the things we're working on, we have a fellow from Northeastern, is to try to write legislation for next year, or even request an earmark that would provide funding so that this can actually have the needed money it needs to be as effective, in my opinion. So as a state rep, I think that this is great. The look bill is, we're moving in the right direction, but I think the state could do more in terms of making sure that the resources needed to implement it effectively exist.
And I do have another question. It's kind of for Ms. Davis and as well for Representative Matias. So the success of the schools with these new learning programs, how much of it is based on how much parental buy-in or accountability comes along with that? Because there's a lot of things that we're talking about that so many people in the district, I forget who it was that said it, that if you're an ELL learner and when you go home you speak in your native language, you're not bridging that learning. So how much of the buyback is in? It plays a critical role in these urban school districts in improving the product that they're putting out. And then what, from a legislative perspective, is out there to try to, for funding to help these families bridge that gap? Because if there's an issue in the learning, right, and we're trying to make leaps and bounds with what Ms. Curtis is doing, getting them to learn these core things at such a late age and being able to take the MCAS, it's a big feat. And I don't think it should all be on the school. Some of this, the parents have to have this contribution and be invested and help. So what is the state doing from that side to try to help these bridge these gaps?
So I can tell you on behalf of the state, and Jocelyn or Frank Cirillo who are in the room, I know that even O'Donnell's, we have a committee in the Lawrence Public Schools that has referral services for our families, right? We understand that a student's education doesn't end in the classroom, and that we need to make sure that we're providing the support services that family members need so that they can excel. So I know here in Lawrence, there are hundreds of places where you can get English classes for free. The Adult Learning Center is a place that you can enroll, and also they provide GED courses. I know the Lawrence Family Development provides English courses. So there are a lot of places in Lawrence that provide these services to parents and family members who are interested in learning the English language. And if anyone has any questions, they can always contact our office and we can make sure that we do a referral. And I think one of the interesting things that I saw when I don't remember the name of this committee, O'Donnell's, but it was great. They were thinking of how do we make sure that we're not just educating our students, but that we're providing the needed sources for their family members who may be looking for employment, right? So if a family member doesn't have employment, that could have an effect on our students. How are we making sure that our parents are having access to English classes so that they can find a better type of work that pays better? So I think there are certain things that are happening in the community that are taking that into account, and I know for sure there are a lot of places in Lawrence where you can get access to English classes.
I just wanted to follow up and clarify on that remark about students going home, and over 70% of our families identify us with first language as one other than English. The other part of the look bill that Representative didn't really talk about that we're also excited about learning more is this opportunity to have a seal of biliteracy happen on the high school diploma, so that students who are literate in both languages would get this seal of biliteracy, which is a gift, right? It's another asset. It's something that they can take with them into college, into the workforce, and beyond. So we're excited to learn more of that because it's really an opportunity the bilingualism is such an opportunity in our country and in our world moving forward. So we don't want to lose sight of that either. And we feel strongly from the school department perspective that our families are helping, they are involved, that we're doing everything we can so that the language is not a barrier. And I know that those of us up here can't speak to the representation from the teaching force, but there are many educators in this room tonight who are here, who are bilingual, and who we look to for support all of the time. So we're excited about that biliteracy piece as well.
It's a great part of the bill that I think will give students access to something that otherwise didn't exist. And the name of the committee at the Lawrence Public School is the Lawrence Working Families Initiative, and really impressed with the work they did. I stopped in one of their meetings, and they're really looking at the student as a whole, including their family. So the next person on my list is our school committee member, Stacy Seward. And if we could please keep the questions to one, there's a list of people, and we want to make sure that everyone gets to ask their question.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I'm honored to be a newly elected school committee member, and I'm also excited. I'm also really excited to hear about the progress we have made throughout the course of the receivership. My question is more centered toward what happens next in terms of specifics. So I'm hearing that we're transitioning to a receivership board, but how do we as school committee members actively collaborate and facilitate this transition? What are the specific benchmarks? What are the timelines so that we can effectively communicate to our students, our teachers, our families, and the folks that we're representing what the plan is. And so we want to be active participants in that. And so I want to know how to best facilitate that, and most importantly, how to best work with you all.
That's a great question. And that's going to be one of my charges to the receivership board, is to, I think, for better or for worse, the school committee has been on the sidelines in this first phase of receivership. If we're going to have a successful transition back, we need to start re-engaging, and I am certainly going to encourage the receivership board to open up those lines of communication, to start having a dialogue, to start having a discussion not only with the school committee, but with the faculty of the schools, with the community as a whole, as to what is it we would like to see as our goals, and that will determine the schedule and the benchmark. I'm being a little bit hazy on the timeline, again, just because, as I said before, I'm only sitting in this seat for a few months, and it will be up to the next commissioner to ultimately make that decision. But I hope we can lay the groundwork for that in the next few months.
And Commissioner, something that I'll add to that, I know that we've spoken about this before, is that I think it's important that we empower the future school committee to be sort of a part of that. I think in order to ensure that they're not part of the sidelines, we need to give them something to do. We need to make sure that they're slowly being part of the decision making that's going on within Lawrence Public Schools.
There we go. And to give credit, I've been in contact with the commissioner. I think we've met in the last couple of months various times, and we've been talking about the self-sufficiency idea. It's great. I know we've seen a lot of progress with receivership, but how do we make sure that Lawrence becomes self-sufficient so all of the academic progress we've seen doesn't go to waste, right? So I think we've had those discussions, and I know that you are going to be considering that as you move forward. The next person on my list is Mary Guerrero.
Hello, thank you. I guess one thing I want to say right from the beginning, when you talk about the state taxes and how we get so much, but I want to make sure we all realize we're part of the state and we pay state taxes. I know my restaurants pay a lot in meals tax. So sometimes when I was listening to you, some of you speak just now, it almost sounded like we're not part of the state, but the state's just being nice to us. So I think we need to think about how we are all paying into that, and think about how Lawrence, when it was put together as a programmed city or like a design city, it was put together very densely with very small properties, and we know what we're dealing with, and that's not going to go away unless you want to start maybe having a school system for the whole Merrimack Valley. That would be very, cool. Let's all of us work together and have a school system that just doesn't target one city like they do maybe in Maryland, where they go to counties, right? And then we could see how we would work together as a state and use those state monies in a way that makes sense so that we're all working together. But what worries me even more than that is the fact that all this money coming into our city, where is it going? Because is it going to corporations? Is it going to, okay, let's put it this way. First of all, not just Lawrence, the whole state. How much money are we paying companies to create tests? How much? How much goes to corporations? And then, do corporations get a monopoly on what is being taught in our classroom? Because they get to decide what's on those tests. I don't know, I'm not okay with that. Now, those tests also have other corporations that come in, like ANET, and test the kids more, saying that their product helps them get ready for the test. How much money are we paying ANET? Okay? So if we break down all the money that the state is giving the city of Lawrence, where's that money going? Because a lot of times, it's corporations picking up that money. And it's not going exactly into the classroom to our students, to our children, our children, right? Okay. Now, the only other thing I want to say before I walk away is this. You said that you want the next superintendent, the choice of the next superintendent to be to be transparent. That starts with it being transparent about who's going to be on that board. Because who's pulling the strings? Who's deciding who's going to be on the board? And why does that person have that authority to decide who's going to be on that board? So I'd like to know those things right now.
If you can be respectful and not hit anything, we're having a dialogue. These people are taking time out of their schedule to be here. This is not a mandate. They're not required to do this. So they're here to answer your questions. There's no need to do that. Thank you.
I'm happy to answer a couple of those questions. The answer to the last question is the easiest one. I'm the Commissioner of Education, and under our current state law, I select the receiver, so I will be appointing the members of the board. In terms of the testing, I can only speak to our state test, the MCAS test. It is true we have a company that helps us print the tests and score the tests and all, but I think it is an unfair characterization to say that a company is designing these tests. We're very proud. MCAS is considered one of the top state tests in the country. In fact, Rhode Island is now using MCAS test. All of the questions on the MCAS test are either developed or reviewed by Massachusetts classroom teachers and educators. This is our test. This is not some corporate test that somebody is making a profit off of. Yes, we need help as we do when we buy telephones and textbooks and boilers for our schools. We buy them from companies, but we take responsibility for the MCAS test. We spend a lot of time and effort reviewing the questions, reviewing the answers with our classroom teachers to make sure that it is an accurate reflection of what they're teaching in our schools and what they, as our educators, think our students should learn. I don't know how many of you were here in Massachusetts back in the late 80s, early 90s when Lawrence was almost bankrupt. When children were graduating with a diploma from Lawrence High School and from our other urban high schools, and they literally could not read or write. They literally could not do arithmetic. We've come a long way from that. That's because as a state we said we are going to care about our public schools. We're going to set high standards. We're going to give districts the money they need, and we're going to make sure that every one of our kids is being held to those standards. To do less is what's shortchanging the kids. So I don't apologize for the standards we set and for doing the testing to make sure that every district is doing right by all our children.
Can I just say also that many of the organizations that support Lawrence Public Schools and other schools across the state are nonprofit organizations, including ANET. So there are many, many nonprofits. They're not corporations. They're organizations that are committed, with committed people trying to make a difference for kids too. And these partners are very important in schools across the state.
Great. I now have Julie with a question. Julie? No? Okay. Todd? Todd, no? Okay, I want to make sure I give my one. Tom Myers.
I'm ready.
Great. Thank you for being here.
I don't know if I'll need this or not. I think I'll put this right here for a second. And last time that we had the pleasure to be together in the room, Jeff, you had indicated to one of the school committee members the statement, "You're not ready," after she asked a question about the press conference. And myself, I taught history for many, many years. And, you know, in the AP course, when you cover the rebellion of the Philippines against the Spanish, when they rose up and they garnered their own independence, the United States helped a little bit putting a battleship there, but it was really the Filipinos who led their own revolution. And after they gained independence, our own beloved President McKinley indicated, "You're not ready," and imposed colonialism upon the people of the Philippines. Well, when you state you're not ready and you want to appoint a commission, I think for a second it would be nice to hear the qualifications of the newly elected school committee. So I'll go through it quickly for you. Okay, Mayor Dan Rivera, I know, has a master's degree. He's a military veteran, in fact, fought in war theaters. He's been elected by us. The next person, Marinella Rivera, has a PhD in, I believe it's in physical therapy as a clinician. Stacy Stewart has an MSW. Adelie Gonzalez has an engineering degree from the University of Massachusetts. Elisa Salas works as a early childhood development teacher. Pat Mariano is a former principal and teacher, and I'm sure she has graduate degrees. And Donna, and I may mispronounce her name, Lido, is a dean at Northern Essex Community College. I think the school committee that's here, there's your board. They're ready. They're elected to represent us. They clearly are qualified. And as you're going on with I'm just going to make one more important statement. You know, one of the issues that the students of Lawrence deal with when they leave, about 80% of them, according to DESE, go on to community colleges. Now, the one thing I can't find out, and it's a question I'm asking you to produce the information, so there's two things. One, why don't you appoint the school committee, look at their qualifications, they're as qualified as any school committee in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. That's number one. Number two, how many Lawrence graduates have to do remedial work in public community colleges and colleges? And if that's the case, if it is significant, and I think from anecdotal information it is, then What is all the testing doing? You're not preparing them if they have to go ahead and do 2 more years of remedial work before they can start college work. So when you're saying that what was going on in the 80s wasn't correct, think about what's going on now. I'd like to see from Northern Essex Community College how many kids graduating from Lawrence that go there are into remedial programs. Thank you, and I'll sit down and listen to what you have to say.
I'm happy to hear your comments. I'm not sure there was a question there I can answer. I apologize, I don't have that data memorized, but...
No, I did not memorize it. Can you produce it for us?
Well, not here tonight.
Well,
if you contact my office, I can certainly have somebody show you where you can find that on our list.
Yeah, if you need any data, please feel free to reach out to our offices. Again, this is a forum to educate, to ask questions. I can tell you that I know that there are people here who are frustrated with receivership. That is not this panel's decision making. Receivership happened 5 years ago. Your local school committee board here decided that we thought that it was best for the state to take over control of our public schools. And now we know that we have this need and this desire to have some self-sufficiency so that our school committee members can actually do the work that they're elected to do. The issue is we're currently still in receivership. And if you look at state law, what it does is takes all local control away from the city. So it's a frustrating situation to be in, and I understand your frustrations, and I feel like there's a way to, ask questions and answer questions in a way that's respectful, but to also just understand the timeline. This panel is not responsible for us to being in receivership. This is a decision that was made 5 years ago. And I think that what is happening now is we're trying to think about what is the next phase of receivership. Do we end it today and just hand it over to our new school committee members, or should there be a transition phase, right, where we're preparing and putting into the structure the support systems we need? So, and this is not, again, they are not responsible for that decision. Our community decided to enter into receivership, and now as a community, we need to make sure that we're there, present, we continue advocating so that we are included in the decision making as we now progress into this next phase of receivership. I know I have a couple other people on my list.
Could he answer the question that I asked? The second one was on data, and the other was on why don't you simply appoint, which is your power, the current school committee, the newly elected school committee, highly educated, and also representing the diversities of the city as the board itself?
I've been receiving a lot of recommendations as to who should be on the receivership board, and I will take that as a recommendation, and I appreciate that. Since I haven't made any final decisions yet, I really don't want to comment on why I have or have not appointed anyone.
And I think, again, one of the difficulties is we are in receivership. Receivership means no local control. Our school committee does not have a say, and it's frustrating, and I understand we just elected amazing new school committee members, and we want them to have a say. The reality is we are in receivership, which means we do not have a local say. And I know it's frustrating, but I think we need to keep that in mind as we're thinking about this entire situation. The next person on my list is Alejandro. No, wherever you want, hon. You can stay seated, stand up.
Hello, everybody. So a lot of interesting things I've seen today. And Dr. Mary Toomey, in your presentation, you said that, correct me if I'm wrong, but 51% of the students have passed in provision in 2017, and dropout rates have decreased in half, and that is an amazing change. That is mind-blowing. That is really good. But those numbers to me really mean, okay, these students are smart, but what else can they do? So it seems like not everybody's developing as a person, and not everybody is developing their skills other than math, English, history, or any other things that they're doing. So my question is, how will you adapt the curriculum to put a focus on students' self-discovery and talents?
That's a
great question. Appreciate that very much. Very articulate as well, so we appreciate that. I hope that you also heard my comments around the fact that for Superintendent Riley, the focus has been twofold. It has been on closing gaps of achievement and at the same time closing gaps of opportunity. Because those things are critically important, that we give all students the opportunity of self-discovery, finding out who they are, who they want to be, or what are their career options, giving them chances to investigate those things, opportunities to act in the role as leader, peer leader, so lots of cooperative learning opportunities, and also getting involved in what's their passion. You know, is it music? Is it theater? What is your passion? And let's help you find that out in the lower grades by having you sprinkle and do a little bit of everything until you latch on to what that passion is. And, you know, then as you get into the middle grades and then into high school, really honing that passion by providing you with some of the best instructors that we can find to really get you and help you to do that. We also need you guys to advocate for yourselves and to come forward and make sure that your administration knows the kinds of things and programs that you want to be involved in and the clubs that need to happen. One of the most exciting things that's been happening in the last year or so is we've been working closely with DPW, Department of Public Works, has been able to bring some grant funds to Lawrence to sort of help build a community with student leaders in the role of being sustainability advisors for their peers and for their teachers, because we don't do a good enough job of recycling. And our whole planet is at risk if we don't take that project on. So we're increasing now. We're going to have 5 schools instead of 3 schools this coming school year, where we're going to have these sustainability advisors, peers, that are going to go out and going to be educators for all of us and to help us learn. That's a great question. Keep up the great work. Where are you right now? I want to ask you a question. Where are you in your learning?
In my learning,
yes.
I attend Greater Lawrence Secondary School.
And what are your aspirations? For engineering. Good luck to you.
I also just wanted to build, because that's a great question. So at Enlace at the high school, we're starting to build a social emotional learning curriculum. So 3 days a week, students receive instruction on social emotional learning. So things like how to recognize their emotions, how to deal with conflict, how to deal with stress. And it's been really cool to see students like owning that and starting to use those. And so part of Every Student Succeeds Act, which is like the state standards, every state can choose like what they're going to adopt. So part of what Massachusetts is adopting is social emotional learning indicators. So over the next few years, the high school as a whole in the entire district, the entire state I guess, but the high school recently has started talking about it as a whole, is starting to adopt social emotional learning indicators, which I think speaks to like that self-discovery and not just test scores with like math and English, but more of like who am I as a person and how am I developing that through high school. So it's important.
Excellent. Next on my list is Chris.
So, good evening, everyone. Well, actually, I think y'all can hear me without this, right? This is fine.
No, please.
So,
No.
Oh, so the microphone is better?
Yeah. Use the mic.
So, my only question is, and first of all, I'm glad to be here because this is an education forum, as we all know. So, I came to this forum so that all of you can educate me on the following question. So, if I'm not mistaken, level 5, right, is chronically underperforming. Is that correct? Did I get that right? So would it then be fair to say that because we're still on that level, should the community then be able to continue trusting the state-appointed board to continue to come into our city and intervene? So really my question is, should the city continue to trust the receivership as it stands, given the level that we're still in?
All right, I mean, I'll put a stab on that, right? So I think, having been the only individual that's been on the school committee before receivership and after, an individual that cares deeply, deeply for the city, cares deeply for our youth. I come from a background where my parents were teachers, and that was ingrained in me, the importance of education. I served as a professor at Merrimack College. Education is prime. This is why I'm involved in public service. Public service isn't easy. I have my own profession, but I'm in it. And at the end of the day, I'm in it for the kids. When I came into the Lawrence School Committee beforehand, what I saw when I was going around and talking to teachers and talking to administrators and talking to students, I saw a lot of missed opportunities. I saw a lot of kids, there's a kid I met at the Arlington, the Arlington school that had a lemonade stand. And he was making about $120 a week at his lemonade stand, but he was failing math and failing English. He was in the 4th grade. As a 4th grader, he had employees. So, and he's failing math and English. And I'm like, wow, where's this kid gonna go? And things like that was what pushed me to get involved with the school committee. What I've seen in the last couple of years, right, there's been a lot of times where the superintendent will say that him and I have not always agreed. There's been times where we've butted, privately, we've butted heads. But there's been a lot of improvements. I go to my district, the Arlington district, I go to that school, and before, nobody wanted to send their kids there. Now it's a little bit different. Are there holes within LPS? Of course, nowhere near perfect. At the end of the day, we were trying to achieve more. 8% dropout rate, I want it to be 0. So there's a lot of things that need to improve. There's a lot of things that need to get better. I think at this point, and I think what's on everyone's mind, sort of this frustration of at what point does governance come back? At what point do we start talking about the process? And and I think one of the good things about today is that that's something that our leadership, not just locally, but outside, can take home with them. That it's at a certain point we have to figure out how we're going to bring back local control over our schools. And in that process, at the end of the day, I think it's not something that can be done within one day or the other. It's going to be a process that takes a while. We have leadership here that's willing to take ownership of it, and I'm looking forward to see how we do that. But I think when you talk to parents, a lot of parents, even something might happen within the schools. At the end of the day, most parents trust their principals and their teachers that are there, and those are the people that are working underneath the receivership.
Anyone else? So the next person on my list is City School Committee member Marianela Rivera.
Good evening, everyone. I represent District D on the school committee, and I'm actually a product of Lawrence Public Schools. I myself was the first one in my family to attend college and the first one to attend graduate school and earn my doctorate, and I made it a point to dedicate my career to giving back to my community, because I honestly feel that if we work together and collaborate as a community, we could really be successful, especially when it comes to our students in school. So with that being said, I don't think the frustration is in the fact that we're in receivership. I think we all agree that we needed assistance with our schools in turning our district around. The frustration lies in the fact that there is a lack of transparency and a lack of collaboration. In regards to the transparency, Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 69, Section 1K, requires that the commissioner and the state-appointed receiver provide the school committee with a detailed written document that talks about the progress that has been made within the district on a quarterly basis. And on my 2 years on the school committee, I have yet to receive that written document. In addition to that, we feel frustrated because we feel like we don't have a voice. So my constituents have come up to me on several occasions asking me if we can add these issues to the agenda, especially the parents who work 2 jobs, who can't make it to a school committee meeting, and they want to talk about these issues, and they want to have representatives there to talk about these issues, and we're being denied that right. So I think that that's, in general, where the frustration lies, is the fact that we feel like we don't have a voice and there's no transparency. Mary Guerrero asked about the ANET, how much we're spending on ANET. We don't get a detailed line item budget. We don't really know exactly how our money's being spent. And we're not given the opportunities to manage that budget. And so my concern is, post-receivership, with regards to long-term success, if we're not given the opportunities to collaborate together, the state, the local elected officials, how can we really ensure the progress that we've made under receivership is sustainable? How do we ensure that there's long-term success post-receivership? And so my specific question is in regards to the transition. So it's my understanding that all the power that the receiver has is now going to be divested to a state-appointed board, correct? So how are we as elected officials going to be actively engaged? What are the exact criteria that needs to be met in order for us to be ready? We just need more transparency and a specific transition plan. So I would love to hear more from you in regards to that.
No, I can't say I disagree with anything you said. That those are all important issues, and will all be things we need to address to finish this process. Believe me, the state does not want to be here forever. I was just speaking last week with the Commissioner of New Jersey, where Newark is coming out of receivership after some 20 years, and that's clearly not the right approach. But I don't have, I'm being transparent when I say I don't have all those answers. I'm hoping that with the new school committee and with the receivership board, that we can start having that dialogue and asking those questions about what does the transition look like. We've never done this before. We've never had you are the first school district under this law, it was passed in 2010, that was put into receivership. So we don't have a lot of models to work with as to how to come out of it successfully. So you're going to have to help us develop that. So developing the transition plan, figuring out what those benchmarks are, what that timeline is, that's all on the table for discussion. Part of the reason we haven't spent a lot of time talking about it yet is because we think it's important to get the next superintendent on board. We're hoping the next superintendent will be a strong educational leader that the community has confidence in and can help guide us all through that process. So I'm not hiding anything when I say I think those are the right questions, but I don't have the answers yet. And I don't expect that I will have the answers. That's something we're going to all have to work out together.
Yeah, because one of the things we need to consider again, acting commissioner, there may be a new commissioner appointed within the next couple of months who has a different directive or vision. The plan is that everything that's happening now hopefully will continue to be maintained, but just take into consideration that this is the acting commissioner. Commissioner Mitchell Chester passed away a couple months ago. He's taken his place. He's, at Jeff Riley saying he's not going to renew his contract. We need to think what the next steps were, but just know that there's someone else that might be coming into this position, and that has a lot to do with the figuring what does this look long term. It depends on who that person's going to be and what role they play with the board and the superintendent. The next person on my list is Glennie, and we're running out of time, so we want to make sure that if you have a question, ask it, and we can get everyone in.
Hi, my name is Glennie Sanchez, and I have 2 children in LPS in elementary school, so I'll be asking a question as a parent. And you just mentioned you have a very unique opportunity to make this transition board something that will be the benefit for our community. And my question is, I haven't heard families into the mix of this conversation. What is the role of families into this transition plan?
I don't think there's any question that families are incredibly important to the whole educational process. We've talked about that a little bit tonight, and the more we can engage families, the better for all our children. But I want to caution folks that there's lots of folks who have an interest in our school system. There's parents, there's parents of special education students, there's school committee, obviously, there's the faculty, the teachers union. All of those folks need to be part of the process and have a seat at the table. But my vision for this receivership board is not that this is going to be sort of a representative assembly where everybody is there representing a a different constituency, and we try to negotiate to see who gets what. The single most important criterion I am looking at as I talk with potential members of this board is how committed are you to seeing continued improvement in the Lawrence Public Schools and in doing whatever it takes to keep us on that path. That obviously will involve interacting with all of the stakeholders involved, includes the students as well. You know, they need to have a voice in this process as well, but let's not confuse having a voice in the process with necessarily having to hold one of the seats on the receivership board.
Next on my list is newly elected City Councilor Maria de la Cruz.
I was part of the school department. You mentioned that our contribution to the State Department is very low. And we also get a lot of food for the world. And instead of giving us vocational schools where our people could learn vocational schools, vocational programs that we can move on. And instead of giving and giving and giving, we rather wanted to get vocational schools where our children, as you mentioned, who are not at the level of the school expectation, that they can have a profession at the same time. Then we want you to think about that for the next planning that you have. We have a parent in the city that I've been trying to help out. His daughter is out of school for a month and a half because she transferred from Philadelphia and she doesn't have a health insurance. Then the girl is sitting in the house at 12 years old, sitting in the house because the father doesn't know how to fill out application or where to go when he needs the help. Then this girl is sitting at home. And it's a shame to the school department because that shouldn't be happening to the kids here in our community. We also have a mom that she's a special need. I was a special need teacher in New York. And in New York, we have the children level by level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5. In here, the way that they designed this, the special ed program, you can have a child in a wheelchair together with a child that is that it has maybe a problem of sitting down or staying still for a couple of hours. Then you need to work on that too. I'm giving you that as the homework. I also want to tell you that I was one of those bilingual teachers, and I was an excellent teacher. I was an excellent teacher. But when the receivership came in, they threw me out like a garbage, like a trash, because I was ignorant. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to follow. You know why? Because I was here in the system for more than 20 years. And it was a shame to the school department that they took out the teachers from the community, the teachers, the bilingual teachers that knew the culture of the children, and they brought in Teach for America. Then, do we have any say on that? No. You just bring Teach for America. At 3:00 p.m. every day, we have a chaos. People leaving the school, leaving the community, but they don't buy a bottle of water, they don't spend a penny in this city, they don't spend any money, and they leave. After 4:00, you don't see any Teach for American teacher in this community. Then we don't have parents meeting Saturdays, we don't have parents meeting at night, we don't have parents meeting early in the morning. Then when you plan to bring a new board to decide, we want to see that you have parents sitting there and that you have teachers from this community that are cultural, bilingual, that understand the system. And we need we have a special ed mother that we try to get a school out of Lawrence because she can deal with the system, and the girl is mostly at home, not in school, because the system is not working. Then I respect you, and I respect whatever the superintendent has been doing so far, but I understand that it's a lot of work that needed to be done. But we need to include the community. We need to include the people who cares about the city. We don't pay that much taxes. We only pay 4%, and I do understand that piece, but we live in a democracy. We don't live in Cuba, we live in a democracy. And because of that, with a 4%, we do have a representation. Thank you.
So, Maria, I'm sure others might answer. I think that we want to make sure that that student, is able to go back to school. So let's make sure that you connect with Nelson.
I went to the school department myself.
So let's talk afterwards, okay? And just get her back in there.
And the key is still out.
Great, so we're working through, we have a couple more people on our list. Let's be cognizant. If you have a question for them to answer, ask it. And there's other people on this list, and we're ending at 8:15. So the next person is Ashley Martinez. Is she here? Not interested? Yes? Oh, okay, great.
So my question is, how often do some of you, or each one of the departments, walk through our schools and look at the quality and conditioning of our classrooms and the rooms in the buildings? And how is it that rooms like the relaxation room are slipping through the cracks?
The question was about how often does the leadership at the central office, I believe, walk through the buildings. And I can answer that personally. I was at the Partham School today. As I shared with you earlier, we had professional development. I was in many classrooms at the Partham today, and we had an opportunity to do that. As far as your other question, we do know that there is some investigation happening, and we have policies, as does the state, regarding any situations that might resolve for needing some safe space or timeout space. So we know that that's being taken care of by the personnel and the school leaders who are handling that. And that's all I'm going to say about that.
And I would just add to that, and I know the district is dealing with the situation. I have not been directly involved with it, but just so you understand what the state role is on this, we have 1,800 schools in the Commonwealth. I will not say that there's nothing that ever goes wrong with a treatment of a student or a facility that needs some attention and all. We have a problem resolution office. And anytime any parent, any member of the community hears about a problem or that they think is a problem, they hear about a student who is not enrolled in school, and if they're unable to have the local district deal with it, we absolutely invite you to come and contact our department, and we'll look into it. But we do rely on people to bring problems to our attention.
Great. So the next person on my list is Joshua Alba.
When you turned around, I couldn't read it.
Is it too small, really?
Well, I couldn't. Kids control.
Lawrence kids control LPS. Or kids control LPS. But Lawrence kids should control LPS, right? The case of Tom and some of the school committee members. I think you've kind of touched on this issue, and other people have kind of asked this question, or at least alluded to it a little bit. So my name is Josh Alba. I have been part of a group called GLAJA, Greater Lawrence Education Justice Alliance, that's part of a larger statewide community and teacher-led coalition. The Greater Lawrence one has been talking for the last year. We were created under the Question 2 project, the Question 2 ballot initiative, rather, last year. Focus. In response to charter expansion, and we won that. It was a great flip. The community really organized around it. A lot of the students jumped in on it. It was fantastic. And so we're still around having all these discussions, and one of the critical discussions that we're having, aside from these innovation empowerment zones that there seems to be like this partnership board is getting us to, which is state takeover zones or charterization like in Detroit or New Orleans. That's a real serious concern here. But the real concern as a community member, we haven't met, the school committee hasn't met in 6 months, since last year. And every time they do meet, at the behest of Mr. Riley, the meetings are not marketed well, they're not wide enough, people don't get enough time ahead of time to even come to attend and know that it's even happening. And then public participation happens at the very end of the meeting. And it feels like a gross infantilization of our community. It's completely disrespectful of who we are as a community, what the city means to the Merrimack Valley, how every city in the Merrimack Valley and New Hampshire depends on Lawrence, and the state is in here basically slapping us in the face, not even telling us that we can have our own word be heard in or taken seriously in our own public schools where our children are going to school here. And so what are you going to do in regard to, or your successor or the partnership board, in terms of transparency for getting people to these meetings and inviting people and making people feel welcome and getting their voices heard as the utmost priority and not the pomp and circumstance that it is currently? Thank you.
Well, I guess I'm a little puzzled by the analogy to charterization, regardless of what you think about charter schools. I mean, from where I sit, we right now we have an individual who is a receiver, and that's been the traditional model for receiverships both here and in other states. And we're moving from that to what I think is a more open model, in that it will have a number of people involved in it, meeting in open meetings that we don't have now for the receivership. So I think that's a positive step towards what I'm hearing and understand that the community wants. Again, I don't understand how adding more people to the receivership decision-making process, how doing that in the context of open meetings is charterization or privatization. It's not, certainly not, it's intended to be a more public process than a traditional single receiver model. Can I guarantee it will work out? No. As I said before, this is the first time we're trying this, but I can tell you that's certainly my intent in proposing this, is to bring some additional openness to the process through this next phase, because I do agree that that's important.
Great, thank you. And we have 5 minutes, so I've tried to remind everyone about the fact that there are people here who want to ask questions. So with this 5 minutes, there are 3 people. These 3 people, if they can get it within these 5 minutes, and they can ask their questions, and if not, I'm going to make sure that if and when a new commissioner is appointed, that we continue this dialogue and that we continue host forums like this, so that we're continuing to listen to you and your concerns, and that we're part of this decision-making process as much as possible. My next person on the list is Marquise Victor.
Hi, good evening. I'll be brief. I think this would be best answered by Dr. Toomey. Does the district utilize any methods to gather feedback from youth about their education, specifically high school students? And if there is information gathered, how is that utilized? And is this information from a small group of youth who are typically high performing, or do you also engage more marginalized populations as well to get this feedback? Thank you.
So another really great question, and obviously administrators as well as the district, school administrators in the district are always seeking input from the students so that they can, plan for student needs and what they want to see in their own programs of study. The high school is doing some really very innovative things in their redesign. I don't know how much you know about that, but they've launched some really exciting initiatives where they're giving dual enrollment credit for both Northern Essex Community College and Merrimack College. And while not all students may want to sign up for dual enrollment, there's other opportunities to be involved in internships where we're bringing businesses into the high school to partner. and kids having an opportunity. So a lot of that is coming from kids being able to say, look, this is important to me, I might need a part-time job, or I want to hone my skills. So when they're leaving, they've had opportunities to, participate in a clinic maybe, and they're, learning alongside some of those lab techs and getting good training and doing those kinds of skills, and things like that are happening. The rest of your question, I think our Office of Student Support would be better to answer exactly how we collect the information, what we do with it, and how the surveys are handled, but we can certainly get you that data.
Great, I have time for one more question, and the next person on my list is James Mora.
Hello everyone, my name is James Mora. I'm senior class president at Lawrence High School. And I guess this question is directed to Dr. Toomey, but anybody else who has an opinion can weigh in. How will Lawrence Public Schools continue to use or begin to use student voice in guiding decisions and continue to democratize our schools, get rid of a top-down hierarchy, and begin to have students at the center of decisions? Thank you.
I'll let the Commissioner also weigh in on that, but congratulations to you on being class president, and it's really encouraging for me to see so many youth here and seeing you ask these kinds of questions. So public education is all about democracy, right? None of us would be here having these conversations if it weren't for Horace Mann and the whole birth of public education in Massachusetts and what went on. So having student voice is critically important, and nurturing that is the responsibility, I believe, of every administrator and every teacher in the district. So thank you for asking that.
And to which I'll only add, I don't know how many of you know, but Massachusetts is the only state in the country where we not only have a student member of the State Board of Education, but it's a full voting member of the State Board of Education. One of our 11 members is the chair of the State Student Advisory Council. So we don't just walk the walk, we talk the talk on that, and I think that's something that the district should be talking about as well. Thank you all.
There's also, whenever we do meet, right? So there's also supposed to be within the school committee a member of Lawrence High School student member from their student advisory meeting. They're supposed to be part of, they're not a voting member, but they're able to ask questions and give their opinion on different issues.
And I just wanted to finally say one thing, like if you have ideas and you have like that energy, you should bring that to your school. Find people who will listen, and you will find them. Like if my student came up to me and said that, I would be like, okay, let's go, like what can we do? So find those teachers at your school who are then gonna be able to get you to those top people, and then work like from the ground up from there, because it sounds like you have the ideas and the energy, so like don't let this stop you, like continue that conversation.
And you're gonna be sitting here very soon, so we need you, right? That's what it's all about.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I'm sorry for anyone that wasn't able to get their question to be presented. We're going to try to make sure that we follow up and do another one of these. I want to take the time to thank our panelists for being here today, for answering our questions and staying present. So if you could please join me in giving them a round of applause, I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.